Welcome to episode 211 of the CUInsight Experience. I'm Randy Smith, one of the co-founders of CUInsight.com.
And I'm Jill Nowacki, founder and president CEO of Humanidei.
This episode is sponsored by Alacrity, a leading payment fintech helping credit unions complete with challenger banks and digital wallets. Alacrity delivers seamless real-time money movement experiences for loan payments, A2A transfers, digital disbursements, and bill pay with a single cloud-native platform that connects the clearinghouse, Fedwire, ACH, and FedNow credit unions can modernize without overhauling legacy infrastructure. Learn more at alacrity.com.
Today, we're talking about the energy equation, how leaders manage energy, not just time, to stay present, focused, and fueled for what matters most.
Because busy isn't a badge of honor, and running on empty doesn't serve anyone. Leadership requires intention, clarity, and space to do the work that truly counts.
To explore that, we're joined by someone who brings heart, purpose, and deep thoughtfulness to her work, our good friend Lauren Culp, the executive director of the National Credit Union Foundation.
We'll be talking about what depletes us and what restores us, even more important.
How to create space for meaningful work and protect your energy in a world that's always demanding more.
And how presence, not just productivity, is a powerful tool for leadership.
Lauren, we are so thankful to have you here with us today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jill. Thanks, Randy. It feels like being back with old friends, which it is. So it's
Absolutely.
We're excited to have you.
Absolutely. Let's kick things off with a moment of just some personal reflection as we move forward. So for you personally, Lauren, what is it that depletes you and what is it that restores you just in life?
I think the things that deplete me the most are being super busy in a jam-packed calendar. I don't just mean by the day, and sometimes it is the day. You know, you start your meetings at the beginning of the day and you're in meetings until the end of the day, and I've never had a moment to breathe. And so that definitely depletes me. But sometimes it's just, it's been a busy month and there's trip after trip after trip. I think what that's like, Jill.
A little bit.
So that definitely depletes me. And I think it's the sort of the other side of my life. The work side of my life can be depleting. It also can be energizing. It takes effort. And then the other side of my life is what I would say restores me. And that's time with my partner, Tim. Recently, we've started walking our cat, Bernard, in the backyard in a little cat harness. Like you can't just do a collar because they can slip out.
Amazing.
The harness. So he doesn't like it, but so that's been very restorative.
That's awesome.
And I think just even finding something to do where you can't think about work because you're so busy thinking about the thing that you're doing. And so, I play some recreational volleyball or work out, something like that, where you're like, I'm so focused on this moment that I can't even think about the things that my whole day was filled with earlier. So those are just some things that are more restorative.
I can so relate to that idea of when you're just in back to back to back and like how depleting that feels. Like you get to the end of the day and you're like, I was busy all day, but I really didn't have time for a coherent thought. And that's where, for me, I'm like, if I get to the end of the day and I don't know what I think because I haven't had any time to just be sort of thoughtful and reflective, it absolutely drains me too.
Yeah.
I was thinking about this probably a month ago now, Jill, when we came up with this idea for this conversation. And the first person we thought of was Lauren, because I think you've always been good about protecting your space so that you can work hard and work productive, but also not burn out, to take that time away too and be good with it. I love asking this question because is that something you've always been good at? Or was that something that you had to add in along the way as you got more responsibility, let's just say?
Ooh, that's a great question. I don't know about it. I've gotten better over time. I think I have the luxury now of saying no or of delegating to other people the things that I know will burn me out. I do think that it has been by necessity. So I don't think I just started good at it. One of the things, Randy, that I've heard you say over the 5 years that we work together is that you play an extrovert on TV. And I relate to that too. I think at the end of the day, I test as an ambivert, but I think sometimes it's just you get peopled out or, your social energy is gone. And then it's just, there's nothing you can do except for protect your time because you don't have anything else in the tank. So I think it's been a little bit of I can't help it. I'm done. This is all I have now. But Randy, what do you do when your extrovert on TV time is over?
I leave space afterwards when I know it's going to be heavy. So, I mean, I know Jill and I have probably talked about it before, and you know it is after something like GAC, I have a blast going to it for 3 or 4 days, but I pretty much need 3 or 4 days afterwards to not talk at all and not do anything, quite honestly, to rebuild. So I think it's recognizing that for me. And I think you both know I'm gotten very good at just saying no when I realize that I can look at my calendar. And if there's things that I know are going to drain me, even if there's something that I'm really excited to do, like something like mentoring DE, I know that will drain me and I'll have so much fun with it. And a year later, I might want to do it again. I also know that week afterwards, I'm probably going to be pretty burnt out and useless. So, how do I make sure to schedule things around that?
Tim picked me up recently from an all-day speaking engagement, and I got in the car and I just was quiet. And he said, "Are you okay? What's wrong?" And I was like, "I'm so sorry. I have no energy. I can't talk."
I ran out of words.
I have no more words.
There's something else to this idea too of like protecting space. So it is like that protection of energy, setting those boundaries, making sure you still like you don't just. Because one time when Tim picks you up from the speaking engagement and you're done is fine. If that starts happening 5 days a week, 4 weeks a month, then it becomes damaging to the relationship. And so I think that clarity of knowing where those boundaries on energy have to be. But also I think that another challenge, and I'd say all three of us have experiences running nimble organizations. Like they're not big companies with thousands of employees. And so in that CEO role, you also balance the working on the business and working in the business. So you can get called out to do, at this point as the executive director of the foundation, you could probably spend every day on the road going to various credit union industry events and speaking about the foundation and what it does. And if you do that, you probably won't build in the strategies or the team development or like what it takes for you to take it to the next level. So how do you work on it from that side too? Not just protecting your energy inside and outside of work, but really like, I don't know, managing the on the business versus in the business work.
I really like the way that you break that down because it's so true. I remember at CUInsight, I would always say, I feel as though I'm building the plane, but we're already flying the plane. So you're building it, but you're still trying to stay in the air. And that is a great way to describe it, working on the business and working in the business. The thing that I would say comes to mind for me is that there's two different mindsets. And so I've had to carve out the time to be able to do the strategic work. And for me, that looks like no meeting days. I try to have at least one a week because much like you, Jill, my schedule fills right up. And there's a healthy amount of saying no, which Randy, I learned some skills around that from you.
I'm still trying to learn those skills from him.
Yeah. And so I try to say no where I can. And sometimes I have the luxury in this role of sometimes I can say, hey, actually, there's an amazing, really talented person on our team who could take that call or who I could offer this, this email to take that and run with it. So sometimes it's a little bit of delegating and you may or may not in the role have the luxury of hiring someone that complements your skill sets. There are things that I would never, ever want to do again, such as expense reports. And I'm so lucky that I have an amazing executive assistant who does those for me. And she likes to do them. So it really works out well. So it's some of that. But to me, it's just such a different mindset. I can't go from 6 hours of meetings and then do 2 hours of good strategy work. I just am like catching up on emails and trying to figure out what I think after a long day. So I do need the space that's carved out that's a little bit longer to be able to start to do the on the business stuff.
I would ask both of you this. How do you break out? I mean, I think email is such a distractor at times, right? But how much of it is urgent versus important? And how do you, that idea of this can wait? Not everything is a fight, right? And quite honestly, in everything that all of us do, there are things that will take priority over others that are more important for the business, the movement, or whatever you want to say, right? So
I recently heard and I'm sure it's been around forever, but this like concept of email is the only thing we have that lets somebody else add something to our to-do list. And so that's probably a good reminder of just because you've sent me an email and told me this thing is important, does it fit with what we really need or what we're really looking for. And sometimes it does. Sometimes it's a client or a potential client emailing and saying, hey, can you come in and do this job that would be super fun and that you really want to do with us? And then it becomes worthy of that escalation. But sometimes it's, a salesperson who's reaching out and saying, I want to sell you this thing that you don't even really need. And then in that case, how do you take a shortcut to just say, I don't take unsolicited calls from vendors, for example? That's kind of an easy one, I think, to give a no on. But I think there's probably many items that come within that spectrum that is that idea of someone else is putting something on your to-do list. And how do you decide whether that ask is aligned with your priorities and what you're trying to do with that?
Yeah, that's the thing, right? Like someone else's priorities might not be yours.
Right. Yeah. And that's so many leaders are like, oh, and particularly in the type of roles that we hold. Lauren's the executive director of the National Credit Union Foundation. Credit unions should feel like they can go to her. She wants to be accessible, I imagine, in that case. So
it was really interesting coming into this role, actually, because I am someone who I like to just take the meeting. I like to hear what they have to offer. I like to make the connection. And even vendor meeting, whatever it is, I like to in general, if I can, and I don't want to say no. And it was kind of a wake up call in terms of prioritization because I physically could not go to all of the meetings that I was invited to. And I could not make enough space in my calendar, even if I was going to have 40 hours of meetings to take them all. And so it was kind of okay, I actually have to prioritize if I ever want to do my job. I have an amazing board and they still hold me accountable as they should. Then I am accountable to the industry too, to say that we're doing with the donations and the sponsorship dollars and everything that folks are giving to us, that we're doing what we say that we're going to do with them. And so it has helped me feel less bad to prioritize because I know I'm held accountable and I should be, and I can't do it with taking all the distractions. But, my hack has been, I don't have email notifications on my phone. So I don't feel like they can come at me. I go look for them when I'm ready.
Nice.
I will tell you, many years ago when Leo Ardeen was on the podcast, who we all know, he was like, turn off the notifications on the phone. And I did it. I remember got off the podcast, did it, have not turned them back on since. And it's been mentally, it's a very beautiful thing that you have to you make the time to go look, right?
I think that when you say Leo, I think mindfulness, like word association, right? And so, which takes me to this idea of really kind of, Lauren, when you were describing that thing earlier of the days that drain you, that's in my mind, you're just the pinball in the machine. You're all over the place. And when I say I get to the end of the day and I feel like I didn't have a minute to actually be reflective. So that cognizance of kind of keying in to those moments, how do you stay mindful of, oops, we might getting a little too close to a draining place, or back to that, oops, I might be fine, but I might not be as present for other parts of my life as they need me to. So how do you stay mindful and cognizant about where your presence is as you're journeying through life? I won't even say as a leader, because I think it's just kind of as a human. How do you stay mindful about that presence?
One interesting thing, and this isn't directly work related, but I think it has had an impact on my work, is that around January of this year, I deleted Instagram and Facebook from my phone. And I don't have TikTok, so I don't have that. And I didn't delete my accounts. And I feel as though I probably should 5 months later if I have any messages I've never responded to or something like that. But so I felt as though I had taken kind of inventory of my day. And I thought, I spend a lot of time just kind of scrolling through videos in the evening. And I don't really know, I couldn't tell you half the videos I even looked at, but I spent time watching them. And it just felt like this drain of attention. And, there I am mindlessly sitting. And so I deleted them and I have never been happier. I am slightly less informed. And so I don't know always what's going on at a moment's notice. And that actually has been okay. And so the only thing that I miss is just the life updates from friends that I might have seen on social media. So text me if you're listening to this and I haven't life updates
just send me the pictures, right?
But I think I got back probably 5 to 10% of my waking hours that I had just been wasting. And so now I can reallocate that time. Tim and I are cooking together some, or we just planted a garden. And so, there's all these things that I feel are making me a better human holistically. And then I think that really translates to your work. And I think it has also helped make me a little more mindful because I'm not at the mercy of the little red notification that, oh, I have a new notification. Let me see what it is. And it's probably not even a real one because they like to do that. They're really in on yeah. So that has been just my best hack. But I do, Jill, miss seeing all of your running updates. Are you still?
Well, I actually did the same thing in February. So you haven't missed any of my running updates because I haven't posted anything on Instagram or Facebook. And it blows my mind because Randy's still engaged. And so I'll run into somebody and they'll be like, oh, how was such and such? And I'm like, that's really creepy that you know that. Cause I am not. And then I'm like, oh, cause Randy tags me in his stuff. And so, cause they're not necessarily people who are friends with Randy who are and I'm like, I don't know why. And then then I'm thinking, oh, if he's tagging me, my stuff still shows up. And so, but it has been one of the things that when you talk about mindfulness and a lack of mindfulness, I can't tell you how many times Randy's like, hey, what's the weather going to be like or something? And I'll pick up my phone to check the weather. And then 10 minutes later, I'm on LinkedIn because I have this cycle of check the weather, check my email, check Instagram, check Facebook, check LinkedIn. And he's like, we were in the middle of a conversation. But just that habit of scrolling through this loop of apps that I touch on my phone when I do it. And I do feel I don't know if that's true or not, Randy, but I do feel since February when I took off the Instagram and Facebook apps, I don't think I do that anymore.
You don't do that nearly as much. Yeah, that's for sure.
Happy on the social medias? They work for you?
What I did was, so I really, and I think people that follow me know, I use it primarily it's my travel log more than anything else. It's not like I'm posting thought-provoking topics or engaging in discussions, with anybody, quite honestly. The one thing that I made a very active effort is I pretty much unfollowed everybody who posts pretty much anything. I've always used Instagram as more of almost a travel thing. And then with Facebook, if you were somebody on either side of the political spectrum who was posting about stuff, I didn't need that stress in my life of looking at it. So I just kind of unfollowed seeing that stuff. I was, trying to take back my algorithm, if you want to say that. But I find that I'm not on Facebook or Instagram as much as I used to be as well, but I haven't went to the same level of deleting the apps basically. But that's been an active thing over I'd say even the past year or two, is just how do I control what is going into my head more and choosing the sources I'm getting it from so I can be more present. Because that was something when you were talking about mindfulness, the word that kept popping into my mind was being present in the moment. Jill was just talking about being more present when we're in the middle of a conversation and we want to know what the weather's going to be, but we don't really care what everybody else in the world's doing also, right? It was just what's it going to be like tomorrow when we go do something? But that got me thinking even more because we've all been, whether it's Zoom meetings, in-person meetings, whatever it happens to be, being present in the conversation. One of the things I love about the podcast, more than say a panel discussion or something like that, is it's more one-on-one and I'm hearing the words that are coming out of your mouth and not thinking of the next and listening. And that's something, whether we're in meetings or conversations with people, to be more present, that helps us make better decisions. It helps us actually listen to learn and hear and not respond. That's something we've all heard more and more. So I guess that's another thing that I would say as a leader, bringing it back to the leadership side of things, with everything that's drawing at us from every aspect of life, make sure that you are staying present with your teams and your board as well, and hearing what they're actually putting out there, because as you know, everybody has different priorities and we have to kind of filter through all of those.
The relationship building aspect has been one of the first things that I've really focused on. When I took over here at the foundation, I tried to meet one-on-one with all of my board members. I have 17 of them, so there's a lot.
And a little different than CUInsight.
Ends of the spectrum, I think. So I was meeting with all of my team, trying to just start to build the relationships, because that also helps you to build the trust in the decisions that you need to make. And it also, I think it helps when you're trying to be present, to know the person on the other end of the screen in this case. And I've also tried in terms of being present to say, if there are these other pressures, we really have to make a decision, or, I've got this email coming in, or this is urgent, to start to just pause and say, it's okay to pause. And a good example, I had just started and we had a really big decision to make and it had to be made right now. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, I have to make this decision. And I was talking to a friend and she said, why? Why can't you just tell them you're not going to decide right away? And I was like, oh my gosh, I can do that.
That's a good point.
Kind of like rewriting the rules. They're like, are you going to pick the red card or the blue card? And then you're like, I don't even have to pick a card. Let's talk about yellow or. So I think that there's just this, I don't know what you call it, but almost going to the next level and saying, these are my only choices. What else is there? Or what are our priorities? And I would also say I'm guilty of this and try to be better as I think everyone can tell if you're answering an email in a meeting. And I like to multitask. And so sometimes I'm like, oh, I can just cross that off my list really fast. Mm-hmm. And then I remember I watched back a recording of a team meeting and I was like, oh yeah, you can see when I was answering that email. It was
your eyes go down. Yeah, right.
And so I've tried to be a lot better about that too, because I think people feel that. And then you're like, oh, did I miss a thing they said? And so just trying to carve out that space. And I think it comes back to being able to say no to the thing, to have the space to be present. So it's all connected. Jill, what do you do? I think you probably have a lot of priorities kind of constantly coming at you.
Yeah. And, it is one of the things you were saying, particularly that I love and admire, is that somebody else is coming at you and saying this decision has to be made, and to actually be able to pause. And it kind of goes back to that idea earlier of does it have to be made, or is it important to one individual that it get made? And sometimes you even saying that, you're on a team call and you're like, oh, I can check this thing off my to-do list. I try to be really cognizant of when I think that an issue is being treated like a hot potato, where it's like, if I throw this at you and tell you to make the decision today, then I can check it off my to-do list. And so my pressure on you to make a decision or take action or move this forward is really for my convenience, not yours. And for my convenience, not necessarily the best interest of the organization or the final outcome on that. And so that ability to really discern that and be able to say, we often talk about is it urgent or is it important? I would say not just is it urgent or is it important, but is it urgent? Is it really? So I think of you walking in, and I remember texting you on probably your first week as the executive of the foundation. And I'm like, wow, you walk in on day one and I have to activate CUInsight because of the wildfires in California that were happening at that time. You might have walked into that first week thinking, okay, this is going to be great. I'm going to have these 17 one-on-ones. After each one-on-one, I'm going to thoughtfully reflect on and do notes. And then it's CUInsight, it was legit urgent. That did have to escalate into a priority and, one would argue important as well. But there may have been some other things, system partners who are key system partners, but are like, hey, I need to meet with you in your first week because we give 100,000. And it's that's important, but can it wait until next week instead? When I'm not doing these other things that I've already locked into that. So yeah, that kind of, is it urgent or is it important? And to whom is it urgent or important? And is it for an individual or the ultimate outcome of the best interest?
It's really interesting too, because they say one of the best tactics that scammers use to scam people out of their money is to make this sense of urgency. You have to act now. You have to do it right now. Yeah. Your daughter is getting kidnapped. You must immediately wire this money or you'll never see her again. And they create this sense of urgency because then you make bad decisions. And so if you get that graph of responding every time something is urgent, you never pause to say, is this the right decision? And so I do think it's a kind of a trap that leaders can fall into, to say, this feels so urgent. I have to act now. And I'm not comfortable taking the time to be really intentional or really measured in what we're doing. So I do think if the scammers are using it to fit their fraud and all of those crimes, then I think that there's a good argument for staying away from acting out of a sense of urgency. And to your point, some things you're this is an emergency truly. Yeah. And some things it's not. So it's a good kind of gauge to be able to build.
Yeah. I love the psychology behind that. Thank you for sharing that. Because I mean, it totally makes sense. Like it's logical, but to extend that, not just from like a scammer perspective, but if you as a leader are being pushed to make a decision fast, we often say like, don't let the perfect get in the way of the done. But like, there's a flip side to that too, of don't let doing it get in the way of it being good enough or accurate too. So
when you're talking about that and when Jill brought up like that first week on the job, all of us had to go through this. And this was a question I wanted to make sure we hit on. And I think back to when Lauren actually first started with CUInsight, we just threw her under a global pandemic not too long afterwards. I hate to bring that up on the podcast. You guys both know that I try to not do that. But when you're leading through, we've all had to lead through uncertainty. How do you manage, like, because there is that, oh, wow, this is a genuine emergency, let's just call it, or something that's really affecting the business. But you can't, I don't think anybody gets great work done if you're doing it 24/7 for an extended period of time. So what have you learned, and I throw it to both of you, about managing your energy through that uncertain time that's going to happen for any leader? And I'll take this back to whether it was the pandemic, whether it was individual things that have come up in the businesses and the organizations that we've all run. But as the leader, if your energy is gone, what does that look like to your team? If you're just like throwing up my hands on an audio only podcast, but anyways.
It makes sense to us though.
Right.
One thing that really stood out to me, and you were right, I started at CUInsight in late 2019. So just in time for there to be a big once in a lifetime, we hope, event. The really interesting thing is, you start your career, and I think I had this perception that the people at the top have it all figured out. And very quickly you learn nobody else really does have it figured out. It doesn't matter how their title is. And so you start to say, okay, I'm okay by not having it figured out, and start to take off that level of, I don't know if you would even call it imposter syndrome, but this level of guilt for not having it figured out. And so to be able to say, nobody does, we don't know what we're doing. This is, I hate the word now, but unprecedented. And even if the times are hard and it's not a worldwide health emergency, I think you can also say, I don't know what to do in this situation, and that's okay. Or I know this is a lot. And for me, leaning on the people that were around me at that time was really, really helpful. I have a good friend who was just starting his credit union CEO career, Brian Lee, who had just started a couple months later than me, and said, we're trying to figure out how to lead organizations and also trying to figure out what to do when nothing's ever been documented for there's no playbook for this. So I think the people have really helped me. And I don't think you need to fake it to your teams either. I've loved the leaders that I've worked for who have been able to say, I don't know, or this is tough. Like, this is very tough, and I'm not going to pretend it's not. And so I think everybody is looking for that authenticity too. Jill, I feel like you're a very authentic leader. Do you find that to be true?
I think that when it comes to the concept of uncertainty, like the biggest mistake a leader can make is to state something with assertion that may not be in fact true. And so one of the things that comes to my mind is in March of 2020, there were leaders who said, and not credit unions necessarily, but leaders of organizations who said, we're not going to do a layoff. We can promise that everybody's jobs are going to be fine. And then things went differently than they knew they were going to. And some of those companies did then, in fact, do layoffs. And so what does that do in this situation where there's uncertainty? Certainty is given, but then it's ripped out from underneath them with and wouldn't it have been better if the answer from the leader was, this is uncertain. We are navigating something we haven't done before. What I can promise you is transparency. Like, I can't promise you certainty because I don't have it either. But what I can tell you is, as we move through this process, as we have information, as we learn more, you'll know it too. And not just transparency about what we do, but about what's going into that decision making. What are we trying to figure out? What are we trying to navigate through? What questions do we still have that are unanswered? And I think a lot of that is something that, whether it's like your peer network, like you being able to go to Brian and other CEOs and saying, hey, I'm dealing with these questions. What's everybody else doing? Or it's going to your team and saying, we're dealing with these questions. I'm the leader and I'm going to keep working through this, but like, I don't have all the answers. And if you think you might have some of them, bring those forward, because like at the end of the day, yes, the buck is going to stop with me and I have to instill this with you and I have to navigate through this ultimately. But anybody out there who's trying to like row that boat all by themselves through those crazy storms is not going to, they're not going to navigate that well. And I do think that false certainty is probably more damaging than saying, I don't know.
It breaks trust. And what you're talking about, transparency, I think is reinforcing the trust, even though the outcome might not be what someone wants.
Absolutely. I want to move this forward, and I think all of us should hit on this one. If there's somebody out there who's listening and they feel like they're running on empty, my guess is all of us have had those moments in time where we're just like, my bucket's full. It's overflowing, and I need to smooth this out a little bit. What advice would you give the leader out there listening today who just feels like they're maybe running on empty right now to move through this?
What comes to mind first for me is take a critical review of where your time is going and find out where you can say no.
I say critical and honest review, because I think sometimes we've all heard it before where maybe we've thought or we've heard team members who were clumping in a lot of things to be busy, right?
Yeah. Building off what Lauren suggested on that, like take that critical view of your time. There's a tool, I've used it myself. I've assigned it to people I've coached. I've assigned it to team members. I've delivered it in presentations even, but I highly recommend not just kind of saying, how did I spend my time, or looking at the calendar at the end of the day, but literally time tracking and indicating whether that's a draining, energizing, or neutral activity. And then recognizing that, like, so if I'm super energized by coaching my team members or having one-on-ones with my team members, and I'm super drained by expense reports, in actuality, me doing an expense report might feel to me like it's something that takes 4 hours, but it might really just take 20 minutes. But the thinking about it leading up to it, the doing it, all of that is like, oh, this is the worst. If I actually track that down and can look at it and look back at the end of the day and say, okay, this week I worked 60 hours, but 40 of those hours were things I really wanted to do, and 10 of those hours were pretty neutral. And then 10 of those hours were things that really took it out of me and made that 60 hours hard. Then the question is, do you just live with that 10 hours because everybody has to do something? There's always those things that have to be done. Or is there someone you can delegate to, have AI do it for you? Like something like that changes that edge. So that honest view, that thoughtful view, but actually not just looking at it and saying, where was I spending my time? But when I spent my time there, how did it make me feel? And how can I get more of those things that feel like they're in my zone of genius and less of those things that feel like they're spinning my wheels?
I would just add to that time is that one thing that you have to protect it. So doing the audit of how you're spending it. And that is a huge thing, because it's one of those things, no matter how much we want, we can't create more of it.
Yeah. Another thing that's interesting about time, though, too, is that we all have the exact same amount of hours in a day, hours in a week. And so we might be competing against organizations that have more money or more team members. But us as individuals, when we're trying to get an edge, that amount of time we have is something that we all have in common. And if we can leverage that for better use, then that's a place that, like, we can get that strategic advantage too from it.
I've even had sometimes where I think there are things that are energizing to me that are not the highest impact of my time. And so I've had to say, yes, I would love to actually do my own calendar because it's fun. I like to Tetris things around, but that is not a good use of my 20 minutes. When my 20 minutes could be spent talking to somebody who made an amazing donation. And that's really where my priority should be. So I also think that there's this idea that even if it energizes you, it may not be the highest value of what you're is able to do.
You have to let some things go, right? So, all right. Before we sign off, we are getting to that point. I knew the three of us could talk forever. It's a fun topic. Lauren, this year we've been doing takeaways. So like that one takeaway from the conversation, and since we're springing it on you, we'll let you go last, and we'll start with Jill. What's your one takeaway from this conversation that you'd like to leave the listeners with?
I think it's that idea of, that Lauren shared on that, the value of the pause, really thinking about Just because someone else tells you it's urgent, is there space to pause? And will that pause add value in creating a better outcome? I'm an action-oriented person. I want to get things done. I want to move forward. I want to move at a fast pace. And that idea, and I think I'm probably one who's more afraid of like paralysis by analysis, but like really thinking about the value of the pause and making better decisions is going to stick with me after this conversation.
Yeah, mine was this idea, and I think it was kind of coming throughout the whole conversation, but like managing energy, our energy. And that's not some fluffy leadership thing. It's to be a good leader. You can't be running on fumes. So that, whether it's taking the pauses Lauren mentioned and Jill, you just talked about, or just really controlling how you're spending your time and taking that critical look at it, because I think a full calendar doesn't mean we're being productive. So I'll leave with that. Lauren?
Mine comes from our conversation around social media. Randy, you're talking about controlling your algorithm. And Jill, I love finding someone else who has also unsubscribed from social media. I think it's this idea that we can and must control the inputs that we are taking into our brain and our space and our minds. And if we don't, I'm worried about us because I just read an article quickly about how AI is more persuasive now than humans. And AI is being used now to spread disinformation to other AI. And so it's just this like metaverse of false information or of being influenced in a way you don't want to. So I think controlling what you are exposed to really matters.
That is the perfect way to, right. Yes, we're all nodding at that right now. So that makes a lot of sense. And I probably should delete my apps too. So you both may have convinced me right now, but that is the perfect way to wrap this up. Thank you, Lauren, so much for being here. Just so much fun. Everything we talked about today, we'll link to in the show notes. We'll obviously link to everything Lauren has going on over at the National Credit Union Foundation. Make sure to check them out, send money. Do it all. But we'll link to all of that in the show notes, plus everything that we talked about today. We talked about getting rid of the social medias, but I think we're all still on LinkedIn from time to time. So you can find us there. We'd love to hear from you. Drop us a message, share your thoughts, let us know what other topics if there's guests you want us to bring on the podcast. Big thank you again to our sponsor, Alacrity, leading payment fintech, helping credit unions compete with challenger banks and digital wallets. We appreciate their support and us being able to have this much fun doing this. Also, as always, make sure to subscribe to the CUInsight Experience in your favorite podcast player, and you can listen to them when they first come out. And there's always the CUInsight podcast book list. I don't know if we talked about any today on the show, but you can see all the old ones. And even from the last time Lauren was on the podcast, she's done it a few times. So, and ones that she recommended for your summer read. And of course, just a huge thank you, Lauren, for taking the time out of your busy schedule and prioritizing us today. And my beautiful and amazingly intelligent co-host. This is so much fun. I love doing this with you, Jill. And with that, you all rock. We are grateful for each and every one of you and can't wait to see you soon. Be well, friends.